Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hello. Okay. We're here. We're on.
We are. May the 4th be with you. I had to say it.
And we actually have a guest today, JV Hilliard, so we'll let him introduce himself here in just a moment. Anything interesting going on for your May the 4th?
Well, when this airs, we will have just completed conference, Pikes Peak Raiders Conference.
Oh, yeah, I'm already snoring. And I'll be about to go to StokerCon.
Yes.
So that I can be really exhausted.
That'll be good.
Yeah. Oh, good. It might mean sleep. It might not. So, JV, go ahead and introduce yourselves, all of you. Please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do and what you write.
Sure. So thank you again for hosting me. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show. My name's JV Hilliard, and you can refer to me as Joe. The JV thing is just a writer's thing. I'm sure that you guys get that a lot. And I have two jobs. My day job is I spend time in DC as a lobbyist, and I work with defense and technology companies. Okay. And then my night job is what you see here. I'm a fantasy adventure author. So I write epic fantasy novels. Has a tendency to lean on the darker side, just based on my, fandom and proclivities. I enjoy that kind of stuff. So, if your audience likes Game of Thrones, or if they enjoy Lord of the Rings, think of it in those terms. It's a book in that type of genre, except with my creatures and my monsters and my own made up stuff over the last couple of years. So first book is known as The Last Keeper. It's the first in a series of 4 in the Warminster series. And it's available pretty much on every platform you can look for. So many of us go to Amazon right away and take a look at it. But if you prefer audiobooks, prefer ebooks, or you want to get a hard copy, they're all available through pretty much 20 or 30 different distribution channels. And, you can also go and order them from my website, which is jvhilliard.com, or my publishers, which is dragonmoonpress.com.
Awesome. Yeah. So you got the dark that appeals to me, and then
it all appeals to me.
Right. So. Fantasy. So
monsters. I'm there.
There you go.
My husband works in defense, and my dad did. So that's a familiar world. That's a familiar world for me. And all it's good and it's bad.
Yeah, no. And the irony is I get a lot of ideas, even though I don't write sci-fi. Just seeing some of the companies I work with and some of their technologies and how the Pentagon uses them, or if they're non-defense related, how a department or agency of the federal government uses them, gives me ideas to kind of sprinkle in. I created a city in my realm called Abacus, which is a city of scholars. And within the city, they basically are free thinkers. And that way I can have my little James Bond Q characters come out every now and then with, a device just sci-fi enough to satisfy a sci-fi fan, but completely within the realm of like fantasy adventure as we all know it in sword and sorcery. But I've seen these things kind of play out in real life, and they've given me ideas for my books. So that's how I've blended the two worlds, at least.
Nice.
What else are you going to do as a lobbyist? Like, what does that look like?
So on a day-to-day basis, it's working with a company or an organization that's outside of the Beltway that needs access to a department or agency or a congressional office or the White House. And they've got some sort of tech that provides for the common defense or promotes the general welfare. And they'll hire someone like me to help them with accessing their congressional delegation or the right people within the White House, or in some instances, finding them grant and contract opportunities for a variety of different development stages that they have for their technology within departments and agencies of the federal government. So whether they're developing a vaccine, or whether they're building, the next electric car, or they're building something for the Department of Defense, my job is to get them in to see the right people and then help them gain access to opportunities for government funding.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could think of about 1,000 questions I'd like to ask you
Right.
about
But,
being a
but
lobbyist,
it's not,
I'm like,
but it's not
no.
that show. Right.
Sorry. Yeah. Off air, right? We can do it off air.
I like it, and it's funny too, because you can add that little bit of intrigue. If you were a thriller writer, you'd probably get so much for that, but there's a fine line between what you're working
way
for
too
and what
easy.
you write about.
Yeah, way too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is more like, it's items that you could easily see within a fantasy realm. So, give you by way of example, it sounds to me like you guys are fans of the genre. Did it ever strike you weird that, like, as great and as fantastical as Middle Earth is, or Westeros is for Game of Thrones, thousands of years have gone by and they're still using swords and shields, right? They still, and for me, it's like you've got these people that not only are smart enough, they also have magic.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe sometimes you get away with that magic being a crutch, but I've created this city so that I can, once a novel or once every other novel, drop in a device that makes sense. So, even though we might not have seen it in fantasy books in the past, in one of my novels, I have something that's my version of a tractor beam. It's this, I call it the Fisher's Hook, and this pirate ship shoots this long cable that's wrapped in bull rope that has a hook on it, and it grabs the ship, and then they row the ship back in. And that's something that's designed in Abacus, or quicklime, which is something they actually used back in the medieval ages, which were these little bombs that you can toss over, and whenever they'd hit a ship, they'd blow up, and they would have this lime in it, and it would be used to blind sailors as they were attacking the ships. Like things like that, just a little bit of stuff that you could see advancement in technology happening in Warminster that doesn't happen in other worlds, that I like to kind of knit into my plots in different places. So
that's perfect though, because I think a lot of people would appreciate that, because it's true though. You watch this and they're so smart, and the most inventive thing they come up with is a battering ram.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've given battering rams a pass. They exist, so it's not too bad. But I just try to find maybe one item every novel to do that.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that way it's not overwhelming to the fans, right? They expect fantasy. They expect sword and sorcery. They don't expect sci-fi. So this is a little, homage to my fandom of sci-fi. May the fourth be with you, as you said.
Yeah.
But also it stays within the realm so that my readers aren't discouraged, or it's something that I believe will be acceptable to them, because in some ways it's the device that I'm using is medieval. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Do you enjoy going to the grocery store? If so, this message is not for you. But if you're like me and procrastinate going to the store, Instacart is a fantastic option to ensure you no longer have to. Save yourself a trip and go through Instacart, where you can get a delivery through a personal shopper in as little as 1 hour. My experiences have been great so far, with my personal shopper texting me before substituting another product, letting me know when they were on their way to my house, and letting me know it had been delivered, all via text. If you click on our affiliate link in the show notes or on our website, you get free delivery on your first order over $35, and you help out our show at the same time. It's the perfect time to give it a try. I guess we've got to get started.
Yes.
So that'd be you.
That would be me this time. So recently, I had the opportunity to go to Florida, which was very nice, because it was, everybody was like, oh, what's the weather like in Colorado? And I said, well, it's snowing in the mountains, and the rest of
on what day,
and the rest of the state is on fire. So I said it's kind of cold and windy and smoky. So anyway, got to go to Florida. I was in a town called Lake Wales, and there's nothing haunted or creepy. Well, I'm sure there is, because there is everywhere. But I wasn't able to find anything super haunted or creepy. It's got the hill where it looks like the car's rolling backward up the hill, but it's an optical illusion.
Oh.
I was like, well, there you go. That would be all I had to say.
All right. And we're done.
Anyway, so I started looking around for creepy stuff in Florida, and there is a lot of creepy stuff in Florida. Just a lot of weird stuff too.
It's Florida.
So what I found, I went looking around, and I found Robert the Doll.
All right.
So Robert the Doll lives in Key West. has always lived in Key West, has remained in Key West. So this starts out, Robert Eugene Otto was born on October 25th in 1900 in Key West, and his parents were well off. So on or about his 5th birthday, he was gifted a doll, which he named Robert, which is his first name, but everybody called him Gene. So it's not as weird as it seems.
I mean, still.
It's still pretty weird. So, and there are some different stories about how he got Robert in the first place. Some say it was a cursed gift from a servant of the house who had a grudge against the house. But this was a 40-inch doll, and it was well made, and it's not something that was cobbled together. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of out of reach. So it makes much more sense that it was a birthday gift from one of his grandparents who liked to travel. And they've actually documented, it's from the Steiff Company in Germany, and I apologize if I've mispronounced that. This is the company that made the first teddy bear for Teddy Roosevelt. So the doll is 40-inch tall. It's wearing a sailor suit. This is a creepy fucking doll. There are lots of pictures of it. It's wearing a sailor suit that probably did once belong to Gene, and it's carrying its own little stuffed dog. Now, I think it's really creepy to have dolls that look like real people.
40-inch tall.
Yeah.
It's pretty tall.
Yeah. So, and he carried this thing around. This thing went everywhere with him. And I saw the word unhealthy obsession, that phrase, more than one. Right. So he took it everywhere. He talked to it all the time. And it does look like a haunted doll. I will not discount that this could actually be a haunted doll. But here's the thing. He's got this little stuffed dog, and people keep referring to it as unhinged looking or disturbing. And I'm like, okay, it's a stuffed dog that's like 115 years old. I don't know what they expect it to look like. Toy making technology's come a long way since the turn of...
So they only think the dog looks unhinged.
Yeah.
The doll's fine.
No, but they make a point of the lolling tongue. And I'm like, it's a stuffed dog and its mouth is open, but it's not like the tongue is... anyway, people focus on
people
weird
are
things.
really freaked out by stuff like that anyway.
So Gene's carrying this doll around all the time. He's talking to it all the time. And he starts blaming the doll for anything that goes wrong, which I think is a typical kid thing. You know, he did it. Robert did it. Robert did it became his catchphrase.
And how old was the kid again?
He was about 5 when he got the doll. His parents would hear, they say his parents heard him playing with Robert, and he would talk to the doll in his normal voice, and then the doll would answer back in a different voice. Again, I think that's a typical kid thing. Yes. But everybody said, you know, it wasn't Gene, it was the doll. But apparently one night, Gene woke up to find Robert sitting on the end of his bed staring at him. So he screamed, and his mother comes running, but the door of the room is locked and she can't get in. So she can hear Gene screaming. She can hear furniture being overturned. And when she was finally able to break the door open, the room was a shambles. I love that word, shambles. He's curled in a little ball on his bed, and the doll is sitting at the end looking at him. Like, well, it's a doll. What else do you want it to do?
If it blinked, it would be worse.
Yes. However, there is something that changes about the doll. But it started with his parents. They swore the expression on the doll's face changed. That if the doll was upset or disrespected, the doll's facial expression changed. People are still reporting that to this day. They say the doll could be heard giggling, and they would find him in places where he wasn't left, like looking out the window or across the room. And like I said, even though he sometimes appeared afraid of it, like when he was moving the furniture, Gene was completely obsessed with this doll. And it went absolutely, and he referred to it in the first person, not as if it was an object, but as if it was a real person. And they say he was like always whispering in the doll's ear. There are reports from everybody. There was a plumber who was working in the house when the house was supposed to be empty, and he could hear children laughing in the house. When he turned his back, Robert moved from one side of the window to the other, and objects were moved as if they had been thrown. There was nobody but him and Robert in the house. So Gene grows up and he moves out. So when his parents died, he and his wife, Anne, moved back to this house. They had been in Key West, but they moved back into his parents' house. And apparently, from all reports, Gene was delighted to see Robert again. His wife was not so thrilled and did not like the doll and was actually freaked out by the doll and demanded that it be locked in the attic. And I was like,
Let's put the doll in the freakiest place possible.
Yep.
Unless we had a cellar.
And I'm thinking maybe she's confusing haunted doll with crazy ex-wife. I don't know.
Well,
Isn't that who you're supposed to lock in the attic? The first wife?
Oh, I guess so.
You know?
Is that the rule?
Not traditionally, no, but I get where you're going.
No, in literature.
I know. I was like, I didn't know that was a rule. I'm uneasy now. I am a first wife.
Anyway.
Look over your shoulder.
So Gene puts the doll in the attic, and then they start hearing footsteps in the attic as if someone is scampering about up there, and they hear giggling. Apparently, Robert the doll is a big giggler. And the school children passing by would say they could see the doll in a bedroom window looking out at them. So Gene goes back to the attic to check. And of course, Robert's not there. He's in the bedroom in the rocking chair by the window. And apparently he kept putting the doll back in the attic and the doll kept coming back downstairs. So because Gene did like Robert, he eventually established Robert in a chair in the room where he liked to paint. I can't remember if I wrote down, it was in the turret room.
I'm just going to be frank. I think there was something wrong with Gene. And Gene was bringing the doll down and doing freaky things. That's my theory.
So Gene passed away in 1974, and Anne wasted no time having Robert locked in a cedar chest and put in the attic. And apparently things calmed down. When new owners moved into the house, their 10-year-old daughter found Robert in the attic, was very excited to discover this doll. But it wasn't long before she started telling her parents that Robert was alive and wanted to hurt her. She would wake her parents by screaming in the middle of the night, claiming that Robert was walking around in her room. I don't know. I think at some point they probably should have set Robert on fire.
I was going to say, just cedar burns.
Yeah. So in 1994, the doll was donated to the East Martello Museum in Key West, which is where Robert's shenanigans continue to this day. They say. I haven't been. Although if I ever get to Key West,
you're going.
This is where maybe my first stop will be a drink, but this will definitely be high on the list. So visitors report that their cameras stop working when they try to take a picture of the doll. People are still reporting, visitors and staff are reporting that his expression changes, especially if anything disrespectful is said about Robert or in reference to Gene. So Robert has been on TV shows. He's had his aura photographed, and he inspired a series of horror movies.
Well, yeah.
Of course. I knew where this was going.
The first one was just called Robert. Then The Curse of Robert, The Legend of Robert the Doll, and Robert Reborn.
Then Chucky, then Annabelle.
Yeah. Wow. So I watched a little clip of the first movie, and they used the real names. They used Gene Otto, and they kept all of that, except the doll looks like a ventriloquist. It looks like a mature adult, whereas the real Robert doll does look like sort of like a young boy.
Okay.
It doesn't have those sharp features and the 5 o'clock shadow. So as recently as 6 months ago, Robert was still receiving 1 to 3 letters per day. I mean, there are celebrities who don't get that much fan mail. These are not, however, all strictly speaking fan letters. Many are apologies from people who have visited the museum and believe that their misfortune is a direct result of them disrespecting Robert while they were there.
Nice.
Right? I'm like, how much power does this have? A rumor has started that Robert has a sweet tooth, so fans And people who want to curry favor with him send candy. And no, the museum staff does not eat the candy.
Because they don't want to disrespect him by eating his candy.
No, they're like, we don't know who the fuck is sending this for candy.
They might be trying to poison the doll.
Visitors also leave tributes. They leave candy, they leave cash, and sometimes they leave joints, which really ticks off the museum staff because they're like, it's a museum. It's not, So they have, oh my God, the best thing. Oh my God. He has his own Facebook page. And there's a caretaker who takes him out once a year, weighs him and examines him, for deterioration. She maintains the Facebook page, answers the mail when it comes from kids. They don't answer all the letters, but she said she believes that the spirit that Jean and Robert both would want to maintain would be to answer if it was a child writing, if it was, having some kind of, writing to Robert for help. But the thing that killed me, and I'm going to try to get a picture of this. I think I did copy a picture. So the museum was taking part in a competition to raise funds for new programming. And they were competing against other museums. So on the Facebook page, there's a picture. Do you remember the Kardashian picture? I can't remember which one. I'm going to guess Kim, where she opens the bottle of champagne and it pops up and
I saw the Try Guys remake that one.
Okay, it's that picture, but it has the head of Robert the doll photoshopped on the head.
Oh my.
It is the creepiest and yet funniest thing I think I've ever seen. So I will put that out on Instagram when
Did they get it? Did they get the funding?
They did.
Because they had fans for a whole different reason than other museums.
Yes, it's just, you look at that and it is so creepy, but fucking hilarious. So, yep, that was my little foray into Florida spookiness.
There's a show like BuzzFeed, I don't know, BuzzFeed Explored or Unlimited or something like that. And it's these two guys and they go to all these haunted places like the Island of the Dolls and stuff like that. And one of them, he buys every single thing you tell him. He thinks all of it is true. So if you go there, there's going to be a demon. There's going to be a haunted doll. Yes.
I've seen that.
And then the other guy, total skeptic, total smartass. I really watch for him because he's funny. And I wonder if they've gone there because he's the one who walks into the room and is like, demons, here I am. You're stupid. Come and get me. And the other guy's like, oh my God, please stop. You're going to make them come after us. And so I could just see him going in there and just talking smack to Robert to see how that goes. And the other guy just having a complete meltdown over it.
They listed a couple of the TV shows that he's been on, but I don't think they listed BuzzFeed. But I mean, the doll, this is a doll that was, built at the turn of in 1900, and he's still getting fan mail.
Yeah. I'd like to know if there's a job I could have at a museum, just like once a year weighing something and then keeping a Facebook page and getting paid to do that. That would be awesome.
I suspect she has other duties as well.
No, I don't want to believe that.
Yeah. But it's not uncommon. I've seen a lot of places where people visit and they take something from a Native American burial ground or some sort of haunted forest with them or something, from a ship that was wrecked that was recovered, and then they end up returning it because they think there's something cursed with it. And, and not only Chucky, I mean, when you started describing it, I don't know, this is maybe 4 or 5 years old now. And I don't think it was a book, maybe I'm wrong, but there was a movie called The Boy.
Yes.
And there was a very wealthy family and their son had died in a fire. And they pretended that this doll was their son named Brahms. And of course they brought in an American babysitter when they went on vacation. And meanwhile, it was like a dual suicide. I don't want to ruin the story. It was great. I really enjoyed it. But oh man, does that sound super creepy? And I'm a big fan. I got to be honest. I love Ghost Adventures, Zach Bagans and I don't know if you guys watch that show or not. It's on Travel Channel. And he has a huge fear of dolls. And he went to a doll museum. This is a kind of place where if he showed up, he would wig out. This is the place where I think that he would, it would put him over the edge. And I've seen even Josh Gates. He had a show called Destination Truth, where he's sort of like a cryptozoologist. And he goes around and they they found this, like, I think it was the Island of the Dolls that you mentioned earlier. It's just 1,000 like doll heads, like, hey, and I've never been affected. I mean, dolls I couldn't care less about, except for that damn Poltergeist doll. Like,
Yeah.
I was 10 when that came out, or 8 when that movie hit the scenes, and that clown's,
Yep,
it just,
sure.
so I feel your pain on that visit. I'm not sure I would have gone to that one, but yeah, you're a better woman for it. I can tell you that.
Just be very respectful.
Yes.
You're looking very good today, Robert.
Yes.
Brimming with respect.
Were you recently cleaned and weighed? Yeah. No, I had dolls. I had porcelain dolls, and I have this built-in shelf in my bedroom. And so I put the dolls across the shelf. They didn't bother me a bit, but my friends, that was a different story. And of course, I was so amused by their reactions to it. I was like, no, I'm not putting them in the closet.
We're throwing blankets over them so you can't see them.
They're like, can we just take those down tonight? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Of course we can't. There's also a Doberman in the room. I'm pretty sure she would eat a doll if it came after us. It's okay. But yeah, people's reaction to dolls is always fun.
And it's worse when it's a clown doll, because you can combine the people who react to clowns and the people who react to dolls.
Yeah, and the Gacy story that's like weaved into it too. It just is, you get the serial killer clown thing. It's just so creepy.
Oh yeah, you take John Wayne,
like Stephen King, yeah,
and Poltergeist, because of course I think Poltergeist was probably the very first I saw a creepy clown, right? Doll, and then and there was some horror movie I watched in the middle of the night about a killer clown person, serial killer, whatever. When I was young, it took me forever. It was just a couple of years ago I rediscovered that movie and went, this is the one I've had images of my whole freaking life. So, but yeah, I still love a clown too, though. So, all right. So we're going to go to you, and
Sure.
You have some personal connection. So go ahead and tell us your story.
Yeah, mine after that might be a little bit mundane for the audience, but so I'll back up and tell you a little bit about my personal story. When I was younger, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, in my first couple of years of college, I started to have a set of recurring nightmares, which started still when I was, like I said, when I mentioned I was in high school. I would have dreams of this man who would present himself as my guardian angel. And he would come to me in different forms. In most cases, I would walk to, in my dream state, I was perceiving that I was walking to kind of the muddy edge of a very clean lake or pond. And that's not something that I would have, for me, I do a lot of fishing. And at the time I was doing hunting and a bunch of things outdoors. So for me, I got all of that. It was very, very real. But there was always this very thick, almost soupy bank of fog that floated on this lake. And he would emerge from the fog walking on water. And he would walk to the edge of the lake, but he always wore a suit and had on, like a businessman's attire. And he would come to me and ask me to do things. And at first I was scared, right? And in my dream, I would run away. And then a couple of weeks, and even some cases, a couple of months later, I would have the same dream. He would come to me and ask me why I didn't do the things he told me to do. And that he professed that he was this guardian angelship over me and that I needed to do the things he was telling me to do. In particular, he wanted me to call a phone number, which to this day, I haven't called. I didn't look it up. I don't tell anybody what it is. I'll never forget it. It's a local number to me. And I just I don't know where it came from, but it made sense in my dream. And if I told anybody that lives near me where it is, like if I even gave them the prefix of it, they would know, oh yeah, that's a local number and where I'm supposed to call. And I ignored it. And then there was a point when I started to get a little older, and as I got into my senior year, and these, like I said, these were infrequent. It wasn't like every night, but the dreams picked up where they left off, which made them freakier, made them scarier. They were things where sometimes you dream and you forget about what you dream, or sometimes you dream and what you're dreaming seems like it's a dream. This was a story that was unfolding, and it was a person that was visiting me, and I was too old for it to be an imaginary friend. I'm not the squirrely type, so I wasn't going to run away from it. But when you're in a dream like that, you just think weird things. And the one night he appeared to me, but instead of appearing on the lake, he came out of my closet. And typically, where I used to sleep, my brother and I would bunk together. My brother's bed was closer to the closet, but the room was completely empty. My brother was gone. The bed was gone. He came out of the closet and just beat me up. I'll put it that way. I would use other words, but suffice to say, he threw me around the room, yelled at me, screamed in my face as to why I hadn't done the things that he had told me to do and that he was here to help me. Even to the point where he broke my bed. He slammed into a table that wasn't even in the room. And I broke through the table like it was a bad, like spaghetti Western, right? And it frightened the hell out of me, and, again, the next day, even when I was at school, the kids on the school bus could tell that there was something off by me. And then nothing happened. The dreams, again, infrequent as they were, went away. And for the next couple of nights, I was shaken, didn't want to go to sleep. And that's something when you're 16 years old, you don't want to tell your parents about. Like you do that when you're 8, right? You don't do that when you're 16. But it was my senior year, and all of a sudden there was a gap, and it hadn't happened. And then I had a dream right before I graduated, where again it was the room. My brother's stuff was gone; he wasn't in it, and the closet door opened. There's no longer the lake, and it came from the closet. And in the middle of the room was this table that in the previous dream he had broken. And I couldn't see him, but I could hear him coming into the room. And he sat down, and I sat down with him. And I don't know why I did it, but he then tried to tell me, look, he was apologizing to me for his actions and trying to get me to do this. And he was asking me, he basically was trying to court me into doing something by offering me something. He told me something good was going to happen to me. And when I would recognize it, when I saw it, and that would be his way of showing me that he was real. And I left that dream and didn't, again, it's enough that's scary and freaky. And it was so real. And it wasn't a repetitive dream. It wasn't like the things were, it was starting over again. These were things that were leading up to something. And then 2 days later, I took a physics test that I didn't study for, and I got 101% of them. I aced the test plus the extra credit. And I knew that I couldn't have done that if it were not for this guardian angel guy. At least in my head, I had that. I had solved that riddle in my head. It had confirmed for me that had happened. And then he disappeared. And I didn't have another dream with him until I was in college, my freshman year of college. And again, he had come to me, and this time he was calm. And again, it was at the lake. And he said he knew in his time frame that it had been about a year. And he says, I've given you a year to do these things. This is your last chance. And at that point, I was, again, I don't care. I was 18, 19 years old, still scared shitless, and there's just something where I was not going to do anything he said. And that was it. The visitations ended. And, I, to this day, have not had anything. No, I've never, I know people that claim to have psychic stuff. This wasn't a psychic thing. I can't tell you. There's no other way of putting it. It wasn't like, I don't know how to put this. It wasn't as if I was seeing a ghost. It wasn't as if I was playing with an imaginary friend. It was deep seated in my dream, and it was playing out in front of me. And so, like any good author would do, I made a story out of it, right? And so The Last Keeper is designed, and a little bit is taken. The story is there's a child who grows up named Damus Alaric. He's the main character in the novel, and Damus is a little bit of me when I was his age. He's 17 years old, and he's a prophet, and he's born blind. But when he was young, some sort of magical person came to him and touched his eyes, and all of a sudden he could see. But with his vision now came this metaphysical vision. And in his dreams, very similar to kind of like Edgar Casey, he had this honoramency where he was able to see the future. And in their world, this Keepers of the Forbidden, where Damus was studying at this Cathedral of the Watchful Eye, they were looking for signs from their gods. And their gods would show them stuff in their dreams. And in Damus's case, he would walk to a lake that was surrounded by a shroud of fog. And the fallen keeper, a man named Grey Taurus the Mad, comes through the fog, and every night gets closer and closer and closer to Damus. And then, at that point, they confront each other. And of course, Damus is scared like I was. And that's sort of the beginning of the story. That's chapter 1, verse 1. And you get to see that right away. But it's something that Damus eventually learns to harness. And he's able to then, divine and answers from his deity. And it's able to help him as he goes to fight the return of the fallen keeper, who is a man who was very high in his sect at one point, who did something he shouldn't have done. And I'm not going to, there's no spoiler alerts here. But as a result, he fell and was excommunicated by his ranks and has come back for revenge. And Damus is the only one that can stop him. So it's like that kind of a sort of a plot. And I used that real life experience that I had, 20 years, like when I was in high school, I just grabbed that and shoved it into the story and spun a little mysticism around it. And, now they're the main character and main villain of the story. So I hope that kind of fits. It's not as scary as the doll story, but
I feel like it's scary.
I'm feeling
okay. Well,
scarier.
Right. Because I'm glad that you never did what he said to do. It smacks so much of depending on how you would look at something, right? It could be demonic. It could be an evil spirit. It could be this or that. There's so many different things it could be. But if something is going in and telling you to do things, probably never do those things.
What kind of...
Well, and then beat you up, right? Like in the dream, he beat me up once and then entreated me with this supposed gift that he was bestowing. It was so strange. I can't describe it except to say that it was real. It wasn't like an out-of-body experience or anything. I've never had anything like that. But it was like watching something happen that didn't really happen, but it happened to me. Like it's a real as a memory, like in my head. I remember it clear as day, like crystal clear. What he was wearing, what he looked like, where we were, the smell of the wet grass near the lake. I mean, it's almost like I had a real life experience in my dream that I know I never had. And it just, I wish it on nobody, but and I've had people like when you're 18 and the people and your kids are relentless, right? Like they're, give me the number, I'll call it for you. Like that kind of stuff. Like I was ever going to fall for that, or, people, what did he do? What did he say? Why didn't you do it? Oh, and they call you out on it, and, you challenge your manhood. I'm being politically correct when I say that. Again, you guys can read between the lines there and know what they said, but, ultimately I tried to explain it to them. Unless you've been there and had something like this happen to you, whether it's a real life experience or one that I had, you just don't do it. I try to stay away. And for the last 20 years, I've had no visitation. It's gone. It hasn't come back. Good. No psychiatrist, no pills, nothing. He told me it was my last chance, and I chose not to follow it. And it was true to the day.
What kind of things did he want you to do?
So the scariest one was to call a phone number I mentioned earlier, right? And for whatever reason, I knew that was in my head, my dreamscape head. I knew that was wrong, and I'd never looked it up in the phone book. I've never Googled it. I don't want to know what's on the other, because the number to me was so real, because it was a local number. It had the same area code. It had the same prefix as the borough I lived in, and I just didn't want to know when I was supposed to call. Now I could have called it, have been a dead number for all I know, but I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to tell anybody the number. I'm not even going to, and as goofy as this is going to sound, I use it for passwords because I know no one will ever have it in their head. So like you could, supercomputers would have to break in to get the draft of my new stories, and no one's interested enough to break into my computer and get my new stories. So, the idea though is, that was the scariest thing. The other stuff was really random. It was things that had nothing to do with me, like things that, so by way of example, I live about 3 blocks from a local graveyard, and this, my church sits up on the top of the hill, and it was linked to a German family that owned a lot of property that was originally a farm. Where I live now is urban sprawl. We're now suburban. It's not even farmland. I mean, there is no farmland where I'm in the city, but this at one time was a very large farm. And the families that lived there all had German last names,
Mhm.
just like we do. And so like, it's like, and it was just a specific cemetery. And, he had asked me to go and pray at a gravesite at one, and from walking my dog through there, there's one gravestone that has a girl's name on it that says Lily Beisner. And she was born in 1900, died in 1906. And then underneath it, there was no other inscription except it said only sleeping. And now if that doesn't freak you out,
Yeah.
I don't know. But the truth is I could have walked by that grave 100 times. And I cut through there because it was a shortcut from my friend's house.
Mhm.
It was also a nice little sled place. I also took my BB gun back there, did things I wasn't supposed to do, which, but like things you do when you're 10, 12 years old. I could have seen that 100 times and it could have been deep seated in my head. But why would I go pray at that gravesite? And so every time I go by, I still, with my dogs, if I walk by there or I drive by there, I'll say hello to her. It's the weirdest thing, but there was nothing that is innocent, right?
Yeah.
Go pray at a dead girl's. Okay, sure. If you need me to do that, it's fine. But then telling me to go and do not like call numbers and make life decisions based on things, it was too much. And so I shut it down. And whether it was him giving me 101% on my physics test, I'll never know. But in my head, it happened. And I know now, looking back at it, I don't know what would have caused something like that. I don't really want to know because I don't want it to come back. But I did try to make something positive out of it. And I spun it into what I think is a, kind of a dark fantasy.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's a, it is a rather disturbing experience to have had, though.
Definitely.
Repeatedly, and at an age where it wasn't just a little kid's dreams happening, So, no, we feel that.
Well, good. I'm glad you do.
Definitely.
And that grave is definitely disturbing. Only sleeping.
Yeah.
Of all the things you could write on there, that's just perfect.
Well, not just the only sleeping, but this is happening while I'm sleeping. It was just,
right?
Like, I still get chills thinking about it. But I pay my respects. Obviously, she was born 100 years before I was, and I still pay respects to her. And I don't know who she was. Just weird stuff.
Yeah.
But all true.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that with us.
No problem.
Pretty personal. All right. So I'm going to do the dancing plagues of Europe. So it's a little goofy. It could be supernatural, most likely psychological. Here we go. My sources were history.com, an article by Evan Andrews, Wikipedia, Travel France Bucket List. I think it's funny that they have it on the travel sites, Britannica. Between the 14th and 17th centuries, mainland Europe, then falling under the Holy Roman Empire. So from here on out, during all of this, it was the Holy Roman Empire. I'm going to refer to everything by what it currently is, just so everybody knows. So I'll call, Germany, France, whatever, but it was all the Holy Roman Empire then. Was impacted by a series of dancing plagues, also referred to as dancing mania and choreomania. And choreo is just from Greek, choros is dance. Much like the Buffy episode, people would randomly begin to dance with others joining in, supposedly against their will, sometimes spreading to thousands of people at once. It spanned all ages and genders, though sometimes a specific outbreak would impact just one group, such as at least one of the stories is about a bunch of children doing it. Those impacted would dance jerkily and even violently in a seemingly semi-conscious state until they were too exhausted to continue. Sometimes they'd pass out where they stood, then they'd wake up and they'd start doing it again.
Damn.
In some cases, it ended in death due to exhaustion, dehydration, and other causes likely exacerbated by those. In some cases, ribs were broken, causing the person to then collapse and be out of the dance. Sometimes a group of people would travel from city to city, inciting the dancing plague in each place they went. Much like various types of modern religious exaltations, people would be laughing, screaming, crying, yelling. At times, there were animalistic behaviors, including jumping and hopping. Some of these incidents degraded into nudity and even public sex acts. The color red was further said to incite the sufferers. For whatever reason, there are all these examples of red making them do even crazier things or upsetting them. Interestingly, Paracelsus was the one who named it. In seeking to figure out why it happened, it came to be considered a possible curse sent by a saint, either Saint Vitus, who was the patron saint of dancing and epilepsy, or Saint John the Baptist. Many of the outbreaks would result in the affected people dancing to a place dedicated to the saint and praying for the curse to be lifted. Because of this, it was also frequently called Saint Vitus's dance. And near the end of the set of epidemics in the 17th century, an actual autoimmune disorder that caused tics and jerks and movements in the hands, face, and feet was diagnosed as Sydenham chorea, or St. Vitus's dance. So that's an actual known illness now. They gave it that name after all of this. Several other forms of chorea were diagnosed after this time as well. A different version hit Italy and Southern Europe, which was called tarantism and was thought to be a symptom of a scorpion or tarantula bite. While they also practiced hysterical dancing, the hallucinatory actions seem to have been wider, including sword fighting, jumping into the ocean, and whipping each other. That just, I'm like, all right, attribute that to what you want. I'm not going to kink shame. The cure for a bite was to play music and dance a tarantella until the symptoms subsided. The color black in this case upset the victims. Just as with the other dancing plagues, some died as a result of the continued dancing. Some supposed victims said they hadn't been bitten themselves, but had caught the bite and therefore the plague from someone who had. So only one person in a town or whatever had to get bitten in reality, then everybody else was doing the thing with them.
Okay.
So obviously this was like hysteria spreading. Though the phenomenon was said to really begin in the 14th century, there is a documentation of it occurring back in the 7th century, still in Europe, and usually in troubled times. Another early documented version occurred in the 1020s in Bernburg, in what's now Germany. This was a smaller incident involving only 18 peasants who disturbed a church service during a Christmas celebration by singing and dancing uncontrollably. And it just, when I'm reading this, I just keep going to like certain church services that you see the ecstasies and stuff like that, whatever the word actually is for it at certain types. In 1237, it hit a group of kids in modern day Germany who formed a procession from the city of Erfurt to Arnstadt. Notably, the Pied Piper legend formed around this time. In 1278, 200 people danced on a bridge over the River Meuse, likely in modern day France, and caused the bridge to collapse. This is one of the cases where those who survived the collapse into the river were taken to one of the St. Vitus chapels to heal afterwards and to come down from their dancing. In 1374, a massive outbreak started in Aachen, Germany, and spread widely to different countries. Impacted countries included France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Switzerland, England, and Germany. So it did leave the mainland some kind of. An outbreak in Strasbourg in 1418 was attributed to exhaustion and hunger following a fast that they'd been doing. In 1428, a monk danced on his own until he died. Nobody else joined him. Which brings us to the most documented and infamous incident, referred to as the Strasbourg dancing plague of 1518 and what is now France. The mania was started by one woman, Frau Trophea, who walked into the street July 14th and started dancing. After a week of dancing where she would collapse from exhaustion, nap, then get back up and start again, her feet bleeding, others joined her, with up to 400 people thought to have gotten involved by the end. There were people playing tambourines, bagpipes, and violins for the dancers, but some dancers were screaming for help even as they continued dancing. They were described as being in a trance and soaked in sweat, and eventually emaciated when it had continued from July to August. It was decided in August to encourage people to dance until they could burn away what was thought to be a fever or a hot blood by the doctors, which they attributed to, and I think we've all heard this in our history, an imbalance in the humors. Yes. The town even built a stage, hired a band, and brought in professional dancers, thinking, all right, they just need to play this out. So instead of it being played out, people kept going and they started dying. Now, it says that there are up to 15 people dying per day, but there is no documentation at the time that supports this, only reports written after the incident. So we'll take that with a large grain of salt. Mm-hmm. Officials soon found that listening to the advice of those local doctors to let them dance it out wasn't working. They weren't stopping to eat, sleep, drink. And when other villagers would come and try and feed them while they were dancing and get water into them, some of those villagers would then start dancing. So the officials turned around and banned music and dancing to try to stop the plague. It was Footloose, you guys, in Europe.
That's immediately where my head went, was Footloose.
Oh, no.
But
No.
But before they did that, they went after prostitutes and those they considered sinners in the town, thinking that the town was being punished for the sins of the few. In September, those who were still dancing, remember this started in mid-July, were led to a shrine to pray it away. So the stories varied as to whether it was the shrine for Saint Vitus or Saint Guy, who was the protector of chorea patients, meaning patients with abnormal movements at that time. There were even some areas where it became an annual thing, with a physician reporting a group of women breaking into dance in Drefelhausen at a chapel for St. Vitus, always near St. Vitus's Day. He said they would dance ecstatically for days until they collapsed, then go home and do it again the next year. He claimed one woman had done it for 32 years straight. Then in the 17th century, the incidents died out, though there are occasional rare ones reported elsewhere. Just for the record, the Holy Roman Empire ended in 1806. So it didn't say exactly what year it stopped, but it seems interesting to me that when the empire went away, then so did the dancing plague. The possible causes have been listed as hysteria caused by superstition surrounding St. Vitus and rampant famine and disease impacting Europe at the time. So bear in mind, these were the Middle Ages for a lot of this. Mm-hmm. The Black Death occurred in the late 1340s to early 1350s. So a lot of these were happening around outbreaks of the plague. Some felt it was intentional, even suggesting cult activity, that or they thought people were attempting to reach a state of ecstasy so they could see religious visions. Another theory involved ergot, a mold or fungus that grows on rye and is related to actual LSD, but the common symptoms of spasms and hallucinations didn't necessarily explain the full breadth of the situation. In other words, it did not typically make people break into spontaneous and unending dance. Side note, there are also theories that the incidents surrounding the Salem witch trials had ergotism as a factor. And during the Middle Ages, ergotism was referred to as St. Anthony's fire. Of course, demonic possession has also been suggested then and now. The areas where this was occurring were heavily Catholic. However, blaming it on a curse from a saint was a new one on me. Like, I didn't know people believed that saints cursed things. Apparently they did back then. Like, I thought they were supposed to be really good and all that. But then I looked up the Black Death and I found out that thousands of Jewish persons were murdered because it was thought the plague was a curse sent down by God. Like, I hadn't even heard of this before. And I've researched the Black Death. So anyway, I guess it stands to reason during the time, a lot of superstition again. So if not demons, it was thought it might be angry spirits leaping into people and forcing them to dance. Another proposed theory was that these were ancient Greek or Roman rituals, which were banned at the time under the Holy Roman Empire. So the believers were performing these dance rituals and allowing officials to think it was a dance mania rather than an illegal ritual, which they would have been punished for. Some referred to it as a psychic epidemic, which is a fancy term for mass hysteria. But a portion of it was that people would visit violence upon those who didn't take part in the plagues in some of these, which meant those who were not impacted often jumped in for their own safety and would continue because they were afraid of being beaten and otherwise harmed. Interestingly, though syphilis was a huge problem in the area at the time, especially during the 16th century, when it was considered epidemic there, it wasn't mentioned in any of the theories, despite there being discussions about what could have caused clear psychological issues exhibited during these so-called plagues. Treatments range from playing accompanying music, as I've already mentioned. Let's get a band. Let's make a bandstand. That'll cure this. To exorcisms. One thing they ran into was unaffected people joining in because of the bands and dance platforms set up, because they're like, I'll dance. Oh yeah, this is a good band, which was thought to make it all worse. So really looking back, there were people like analyzing what the government had done. They were like, that was ineffective. And it's like, well, what would you have done to stop people dancing like loons? What would you have done?
Dancing until they drop.
I mean, probably I wouldn't have hired a band and built a bandstand, but I don't believe in humors either. So what can I say?
So I got a couple of questions here. Sorry. So first of all, I didn't know as a lapsed Catholic boy myself, I didn't know that we had a patron saint of dancing. Like I didn't know that was a thing. I know we have a lot of patron saints of something. I didn't know dancing would be one that they would have a patron saint for, but I guess I was wrong. Secondly, it sounds to me like, yeah, I mean, when you started leading into the story, I assumed it was going to, like, I could feel the Pied Piper thing coming.
Yes.
But that's, rats, and then rats, they're leading them out of town, and that's taking the plague with them because rats bring plague, right? So, like, I get that, and that sounds like urban legend-ish,
Yes.
And it's a way to explain something in a story where people weren't able to read, mostly a literate population. It's something that's, crazy enough that people would believe, but the dancing thing, I've never heard that. I've seen situations where they believed that you had to get stuff out of I forget which plague it was, but I remember watching The Tudors. I don't know if you guys are a fan of this, but they, the Henry VIII got up out of bed. He was sick with this plague. They thought the plague was going to kill him, and he would just jump up and down and sweat it out. He thought by jumping out and sweating it out, he was getting it out of his system. Like you said, he had hot blood. And I'm certain that's a fever or whatever nowadays, but like I've never heard these stories, and that is some interest. That would make a great short story. Well, I think a real nice short story on there. That could be creepy, it could be funny, it could be all of the above.
Well, and then we saw, so there's an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where it's demons doing it, right? Or whatever.
And then it was a demon, and I just rewatched it not too long ago. So he had been summoned, and people were bursting into song and dance.
Well, yes. And then there is another fairy tale, and I can't remember the name of it. It's like the Red Shoes or something like that. And it's every single night this group of sisters goes and they dance until there's holes in their shoes and their feet are bleeding. And I was just wondering, was this based on that too? But since I couldn't remember for sure what the story was, I couldn't really look it up. But it really sounds to me like that might have come from that, even though it was only at night that they were doing it. And I'm sure there was a reason. Like if I reread it, the moral is going to be clear because it's fairy tale, right? But the thing about the saints, the patron saint of this and that, I feel like half the time people are making up what it is or extracting because this is the patron saint of this thing. It's also this thing. Like I was surprised there would be a patron saint of epilepsy, for example. Like, is there really? Or is this just a stretch that somebody has kind of extracted that? I don't know.
There's a patron saint of coffee houses.
But
because today is their day, and I can't remember what the patron saint's name is.
I understood it. And I'm not a coffee drinker, but my understanding of the story is it was a Capuchin monk that had done it, and so that's why it's called cappuccino. These Capuchin monks made coffee, and it became, I guess they were located somewhere in Italy or near Italy, and it became cappuccinos based on the fact that these monks would brew coffee. That's what I thought it was, but I could be totally wrong. I'm not a coffee guy, so to have a patron saint of coffee sounds something that, me and my Catholic brothers and sisters would absolutely do.
Well, I hadn't heard about the saints casting curses, so I'm like,
no.
I gotta know somebody.
But I do. But then I was like, I mean, like we still, that hurricane in New Orleans was because God was there's always somebody who says God was punishing us, and that's why such and such happened. And I'm like, I guess that's really the equivalent of saying a curse for people who don't believe in curses necessarily, right?
Or something like the stigmata.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is that a curse? And yet that's supposed to show the injuries for Christ, and it's supposed to be super holy. And so people that, might look at that as a curse, others would look at that as a blessing.
Right.
I guess it just depends on on which side of the event you're in. If you're the one that's dancing in this case, you're praying to your patron saint to stop dancing. Others are just saying maybe that's a way of remembering that saint and exalting and deifying or glorifying them in some way. Who knows? That is just a freaky story. And I'm a huge Buffy the Vampire nerd. I mean, don't tell anybody this, but I'm a vamp. I'll watch anything with vampires in it. And Buffy is campy and sometimes cheesy as it was, I love that show. I can't get enough of it. And
Uh-huh.
I'm surprised I don't remember that episode. I'm going to now watch it for that. I don't know how I missed it.
It's called Once More with Feeling.
Yeah. So if you look it up, here's the thing. I hadn't watched Buffy. It's in B's comfort watch.
Yes.
So she'll watch over like the series.
Yeah.
A
The
big
first
Angel
time
fan,
I
I'm
saw
assuming.
it. Oh, are you
What?
an Angel fan?
I do like Angel, but I think that went off the rails.
It didn't have the same feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once they went into the law offices,
Then it was over for you. You kind of jumped the shark.
I mean, I kept watching it because when they brought Spike back, I was like, this is the interaction between Spike and Angel always makes me laugh because they hate each other so much. But
Yeah, no. I hear you.
It just got bizarre. I mean, okay, it was a TV show about vampires, but
Yeah.
it just
About a cheerleader who slayed vampires. It's even worse than that. Come on.
yeah.
And I watched it religiously, so I'm okay with it.
Oh yeah.
So I liked the movie better. So that's something that we've conversed about before. I watched the whole series eventually, but for the record,
I did like the movie.
but the first time I saw it, it's because a local con of ours does a sing along with that episode.
Mm-hmm.
Mile
You're
High
kidding
Con in
me.
Denver does every year. They do that. They do the Neil Patrick Harris Dr.
Horrible sing
Horrible sing along, and then they do
Rocky Horror.
Rocky Horror. So, but that was the first I ever saw, and so that was the episode I saw over and over and over again. So I'm really familiar with that episode, and then I
think
ultimately
it's-
watched the whole series.
I think
there.
it's in season 6.
Yeah.
I'll
there you go. You should
I'll
look
be on
it
the
up.
lookout for it now. It's right here in the front of my brain. I'll
It's a pretty
Google it
funny
tonight.
episode.
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah. So I guess it's time for us to wrap up. And again, your website was jvhilliard.com.
It was. And my social media is almost as easy. It's either at JV Hilliard Books on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, or JV Hilliard on Facebook. So you can find me in any of those locations.
Okay.
And The Last Keeper is available as we speak. And the second book comes out in either July or August of this year. So, keep a lookout for it.
Exciting.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on and
Yes.
chatting with us.
Yeah.
It was a great story that you had for
Yeah.
us.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I know it's a little dark compared to the tour. Well, the doll was dark. That is creepy. But, I'm glad you guys suffered, the story there, and I appreciate the time.
And if you ever decide you want someone to call that number for you,
No,
I would call that number for you. But
no. I know, and I've had people offer, and the answer is no.
no.
It's gone. It went away. Let's not.
No, to do it.
Yeah, we're not digging up a grave on that one. It's gone. So
I'm
dead and buried, as far as I'm concerned.
that person who's like, no, I want to go see what's behind that curtain. I want to see
Yeah.
what's under that rock. I want to.
Yep. And then when he starts visiting you, then you'll know why I don't want
That's
to.
right.
That's true.
That's on you. I already have
Right.
my night spooks. So
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, you got enough on your plate, right?
I do.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk at you next week.
Yes, we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.